Hello, it's Joanna Toch here with the Family Law Cafe podcast. I'm delighted that today we have Arlene Small, who is a specialist family law barrister. We're going to have a chat about what barristers do, what they enjoy. And so welcome, Arlene. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you.
So tell us about you, Arlene. How would you describe yourself?
Okay, so the official title is Specialist Family Barrister. I'd like to think of myself as a bit of a fire starter when it comes to the area of family law. I try to be as accessible as possible to clients, whether they be professional or lay clients. Definitely want to move away from the perception that barristers are stuffy and distant and sometimes not as empathetic to their clients as they would like us to be. So that's really me. I've been in the profession for over 20 years as a specialist family practitioner, and it's just something that I'm really passionate about and just want to make sure that when my clients do have work with me, that they come away feeling that it's been a positive experience.
Yeah, you've made a difference. So what brought you into family law?
Okay, so my backstory is that I'm a child from the care system. I came up through the care system as a teenager, and anyone that knows anything about that area will know that it can be quite a difficult and sometimes quite traumatic and stressful experience for anyone that's going through it, whether you're a parent or a child going through the care system. And one of the things in particular that I was struck by, even looking back as an adult, is just how little say you have in decisions that are taken about your future and about your life and your well-being, and just how disempowering that could be at times. And I just really felt that I wanted to be in an area as an adult where I could have a voice and give a voice to other people who were perhaps struggling themselves to be able to say what was on their mind or say what they actually wanted or needed to get out of a particular situation. And just generally, I love the idea of being able to empower people, advocate on people's behalf. I like the idea of being able to make an impact so that when they, as I say, come away from working with me, they feel very positive about their future, even though the topic itself is quite difficult, the subject's quite difficult. I love the cut and thrust that takes place in court, in as much as being able to argue sounds very adversarial, but that's not really what I mean, but just being able to put forward the point of view of somebody who perhaps can't always find the right words to say and get their point across.
So really, going from a position where you had very little agency in your life, you've become someone who's, if I may say, a bit of a powerhouse to make change, positive change for other people.
Absolutely.
With a sense of belief.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, again, this idea that barristers come from one type of background, or people in the legal profession come from one type of background, I think it's really important that we have a range of experiences so that when we are representing people at court, we know where they're coming from. You know, we have some shared experiences, we can relate, and we can, dare I say, be human in that situation. As lawyers, we don't always have a great reputation for that. And I think it's important that people realise that we do have a human side to us. We do have human experiences that we bring to the case when we're representing them.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because if you go to the Old Bailey, you have the figure with justice is blind,
yes.
And so there's that element that everyone's equal under the law, and barristers wear wigs and gowns, so look very anonymous, certainly when they do criminal work.
Yes.
But things have changed, haven't they, in the last 30, 40 years? And it's a very interesting point that we now, as barristers, are able to show some of our personality. We're not those anonymous people who are just dispensing justice and in this anonymous world. It's a really, really interesting point. So did you always want to do family law, or did you do other kinds of law before you went into family?
Yeah, I think like most barristers, when you first start, particularly if you start in a mixed set where there's different types of work going on. So I had experience of doing some criminal work, including prosecution work, and a bit of housing, work as well. So there was that variety at the bar. You're just sort of trying to find your feet and just get experience in advocacy. But I ended up having a family pupillage with a phenomenal advocate, Janet Casey now.
Wow.
And she just brought family law to life for me. I was absolutely astonished. I had no idea about the complexity that was involved, about the level of skill that was involved in being a family law advocate, because it was, at one point it was presented like, well, it's like being a social worker, but it's so not. I mean, the way in which I saw her navigate the family courts, deal with clients, deal with other advocates, I was just completely blown away. And so much so that when I had my second six pupillage, which was in a criminal set, I was really itching to get back to the family law, and that's where I've landed. So no, it wasn't my first choice, as it were, but it's certainly now my first love. I would not change it for the world.
And it's incredibly complex, isn't it? Just because obviously we try to keep it simple, but there is and there's definitely a movement to say, you know, you don't have to have any knowledge. It's family law. Well, just about families. I think it's the most complex area. I really do. I did 8 years as a criminal barrister. Wow. I actually found that just too simple. That was really my main reason to not continue with it. I just found it. I was doing personal injury as well. I taught for a while. I came back, did civil, and then I ended up with family. And so I've done lots of different areas. And just like you, I did landlords and tenants.
Yeah.
Have I done a little bit of employment, just all those different areas. But what I'd say about family, it's really fast, isn't it? Because say you and I were at court and we were on opposing sides, and let's say it was a money case, you know, you might come up to me and we'd have a negotiation. And when I started doing family work, that's something that really struck me, that if you're in a negotiation with someone incredibly smart, knows their brief, it can move quite quickly. Yeah. I mean, is that something you've ever thought about?
Yeah,
that's different.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, the direction of travel in any particular case, it can switch.
Yeah.
And even, you know, I remember even things like position statements that we have to draft. By the time I got to court and had a conversation with my opponent, I'd look at my position statement and think, well, this bears no resemblance now to the case that we're actually having to deal with. So I think you're right about that. I think the other thing about family law is the impact. It's almost like ripples in a pond.
Yeah.
So you deal with the case on the day, but you know there are such far-reaching consequences for the people that you're working with. And that means for their children, potentially, for their careers, for their entire network, for their financial future. There is just so much that is triggered by what takes place. And I think that places a huge responsibility on us as advocates. So it makes you really, you know, think really long and hard about the advice that you're giving and the way that you present your case in a way that perhaps in other areas of law you wouldn't necessarily have to do.
That's such a good point. I mean, say you're advising on tax. I'm sure that your tax advice, yes, it would have some consequences, but easier to see that through.
Yeah.
When you're dealing with family, as you say, there's just it's multifaceted, isn't it? And different family members and how it will affect things.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's really interesting. And what do you think about the fact that there's a move to transparency in the family courts? Because what we do is largely unseen, isn't it? Because, of course, you know, if you go into a family court, it's confidential.
Yes.
And especially to preserve, you know, the rights and respect for children who it's not their choice that their case is in a family court. But there is a move to transparency, to people learning more about what goes on in family. Have you got any thoughts about that?
I love the idea of transparency. I think my big thing about transparency is that it allows people perhaps to manage their expectations about what's actually going to take place, and helps you as an advocate to prepare them for that as well. If everything's shrouded in secrecy, sometimes I've had conversations with clients and I've explained what's gone on, and maybe their experience of a courtroom is, I don't know, EastEnders or Coronation Street or something. And you tell them what happens and they're sort of looking at you, really? Is that really what happens? Is that really what takes place? So I like the idea of transparency, just because I think it's important for people to know what it is that they're stepping into or getting involved in. And also, I think for advocates, I think for for too long, some in our profession have felt that the fact that we are in court is enough. No explanation necessary, no justification necessary. Unless something goes wrong, then, we think about accountability to perhaps the Bar Council or whoever. But I think we've got to think to ourselves, okay, if a light was shone on this, would this be appropriate? Would this be professional? Is this something which I'd be quite happy for someone to come and spotlight or have a look at? Do you see what I mean? As opposed to doing something, thinking, well, it's just me and the client. No one's ever going to know. Do you know what I mean?
I do. And I've heard that when journalists go down, even though they can't report on names, they can only report on the nature, they have restrictions. But what I have heard is, judges sitting up a bit more carefully and everyone, because you're being observed and, shining a light on something should be good. Absolutely. It should be a good thing for justice.
No, I agree. And I think also, particularly where judges are concerned, again, there is the temptation just to sort of be in a bit of a judge's bubble. But if they know that, in fact, the actions are being looked at, how they speak to the members of the public and other advocates is being looked at, I think we would see some big changes.
Yeah, I think also some judges were really positive about it because you really get some outstanding judges. Yes. I think I always feel that the family law system gets a lot of criticism and actually rightly so for the slowness and all the delays and lots of things that are not good about it. But there are some, sometimes you wow, wow, and I just feel that they're not, it's a shame for such outstanding judges that they're not known about and what a lot of good things that they do. I mean, interesting, I was at court yesterday and just got chatting I was just looking at, I hadn't been to this court and it was upstairs. Extremely helpful usher who then said, well, I sat as a magistrate for 30 years. I've been on rules committees and now I work as an usher. And it was really interesting to chat to him and he was so dedicated. So there's this big role for magistrates as well. And I think magistrates can, they can be criticised. But we were talking about the fact, obviously legal aid went some 10 years ago. What's your thoughts on that and the big changes there have been in the time that we've been in practice?
I'm really disappointed when people who should have access to justice cannot get access to justice, and that the sole reason for that is their financial position. It really grieves me at times where sometimes a client will come along and they've got a solid case. They've got something that they want to say in terms of whether it's their child or their partner or in financial remedies case. And the biggest hindrance to taking it any further is finances. I mean, I'm pleased to say, obviously we've got Advocate as in terms of pro bono organisations. A lot of advocates I know will give, free advice, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, just to sort of help people along. Again, something which is not really spoken about. And a lot of advocates equally, when they get their brief and it says, we want you to deal with these 5 points, as they're talking to a client, if another 5 points come out, they will still address those. Do you know what I mean? We're all doing our part.
We're trying.
We're all doing our bit, which, often people don't know about. But I do think it's really, really appalling that, as I say, people cannot get their cases heard because of the financial situation. Having said that, I know that there will be the other side where people will say, particularly in private law cases with fathers and mothers, where the mother perhaps, is able to prolong proceedings because they've got legal aid, and the father says, well, I haven't got that funding, so I can't. So I know that there are situations.
I'd look at that. I'd look at that and say, if one side has public funding, the other side should too.
Yeah.
Almost like treat it like care proceedings where there is public funding because, there's an issue, the state is intervening.
Yeah.
But in a way, wouldn't it be helpful that both sides were funded in that situation? That's one simple way.
Yeah, I agree. And in fact, I've had interesting discussions with clients where they've said, they almost want the other person to lose their public funding. Yeah. And they say, well, they're not, they shouldn't be allowed to have it. And, what can I do? And I say to them, listen, you're better off with them having funding, because if they didn't have funding and you know, it might just be the two of you trying to resolve it. And the reason you're in court is because you couldn't do that. So I take the point entirely. It would be ideal for both to be funded. But if one party can, then I think it's better all round. And even things like preparing bundles and things like that. If there's a solicitor, if there is a solicitor, that's better than
having I mean, so many, I think it's 86% of cases have one party who's not represented now. And I think we both know that it takes a lot longer for that case, because there are things that people don't understand. You know, again, when I was in court yesterday, the other side, he hadn't complied with various directions, not quite sure why, but it just made things difficult. We did resolve matters. And, you know, it made it harder. And there were things that he just didn't understand. You know, I had to explain what cost reserved means, which actually no one would know.
No, exactly.
If you weren't a lawyer.
Yeah, exactly.
No, cost reserved doesn't mean, I am going to apply for those costs and I'm going to do it at the next hearing. And then kind of things sort of shuffled and then because there was a lack of understanding. And I know that you've set up a business, haven't you, which gives some advice. So tell us about that.
Yeah, so I set up Family Law Answers because I wanted something a bit more practical. You know, again, going back to this idea of barristers in particular being these sort of lofty individuals, you know, in a sort of hallowed room that you can only go down that particular corridor if somebody, you know, a solicitor invites you. And I just don't want that to be the impression that people have of us. So I set up Family Law Answers about 2 years ago. And basically it's supposed to be a mechanism whereby people can call up, get 20 minutes, 30 minutes of free advice. You know, sometimes I'll send them, you know, a document sort of summarising that, or perhaps signpost them to websites, organisations such as Family Law Cafe that might be able to help them. And then if at that point they need a bit more, they need some formal instruction, then I can sort of, again, signpost them through my chambers, the barrister group, or other solicitors' firms, consultancies that I have connections with. But it's really sort of almost like a funneling service. But I just think it makes it easier for people. You say to somebody, Family Law Answers, and it sort of does what it says on the tin. It's an answer to a potential family law problem that you have. And I've had great success with it. I've met some fantastic people through it, through the network. I've had the opportunity to speak on the Baby Fathers podcast, which is, again, as it says on the tin, something which is geared towards helping fathers navigate being parents or co-parenting where they've separated from the mother in those sorts of circuit situations. So it's been brilliant. I mean, I absolutely love it. Of course, it's a lot of work, as you know, and you can't always help everybody to the extent that they want to be helped. But so far, the feedback's been really positive. People that have said, you know, they've really benefited from me being able to give them that initial targeted advice that maybe on the high street they have to pay £500 for, or, you know, who knows.
So, yeah, I love that. And I think when did you hear about Family Law Cafe? Was it last year?
Yeah, it's probably about a year, maybe less than a year. But again, you know, a client who was publicly funded, instructed me via their solicitors. Then that public funding fell away. They found your wonderful organisation. And then I just remember getting the call from them saying, oh, you know, would you take a call from Family Law Cafe? Would you work with them? I was like, of course. I mean, I love the, again, it's the accessibility of it and just making family law human for people, and not this very sort of clunky, rigid mechanism that, you know, that nobody can understand.
Yeah, I think both you and I recognise, well, I hope we do, that more people should be assisted by lawyers. Yeah. I don't want people to go to court on their own. And I want to make getting the assistance more affordable. And I know there are so many lawyers that were in the profession that have left because, of course, if there is no legal aid, then if you're a junior lawyer, you won't necessarily be able to find enough work, so they go and do something else. So that's been another casualty of the changes to legal aid and taking matters out of scope. So not only people couldn't get lawyers, I think, have left the profession because then the average age for a family law barrister is 40, in their 40s, 41, something like that. Yeah. And I find that shocking, and I feel there should be younger barristers. We need to give them the work, you know, the fees need to be reasonable, and then that would help people, that, you know, they would get that assistance, as I'm trying to create a different culture, really.
I think the other difficulty has been, I mean, you say that we've lost barristers. I think we've also lost a lot of solicitors who no longer do legal aid work.
Oh, yes, yeah.
And occasionally I will get a call from, you know, someone calls me and says, oh, do I know lawyers that do legal aid? And I can probably count them on one hand. The ones that I'm sure there's more, but the ones that I have experience of. And a lot of firms have just said, we're just not doing legal aid anymore. And so you automatically already cut down people's access to that, you know, advice at that level as well.
And I don't know if it was your experience, but, you know, as barristers, and perhaps people don't understand or know this, but I think I usually wait about 7 years to be paid.
Yeah.
It's like, what profession in what world is that normal?
Yeah.
You can only laugh.
Well, I know. I mean, it has improved quite a lot. I mean, it has improved a lot. It's still, you still end up, you know, waiting a bit, but, you know, there's more certainty around that it is going to come. Do you know what I mean? But yeah, the Legal Services Commission, I think, have done a lot of work in that area, because that was another reason why people just did not want to do publicly funded work. Do you know what I mean? Having said that, and of course, you know, everybody needs to be paid. I have found that some of my most interesting cases have come from publicly funded work. Do you know what I mean? So sometimes there is a huge
absolutely.
advantage
You want to do it. Yeah, you want to do it.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
I mean, I know now for a fact that I was representing a father years ago, and I walked in, I'd asked Chambers, could I have half term off? Just asked. And they said, oh, can you come in? There's an urgent matter. Okay.
Yeah.
Once again, yeah, you know what they mean. Yeah, and so I went and I came back, and because this person wasn't easy, and I think he would admit to that. It wasn't easy. Everyone hated us in that case. It was a care case, and went back into Chambers and said, oh yeah, well, we sent you because we knew you were the only person that could do it. I'm like, no, what, you know, you told me there was no one else. Anyway, I carried on doing that case for quite a few years, and the children had their own representation. I think there were children of 12 and 10, but that young lady is a barrister now, and she's a family law barrister just starting out. And so and you know, he still you know, will contact me, but I know that I just never got paid for that. Never got, because the solicitor didn't put the fees in properly, and I wasn't even paid for most of that case. But it was still a great case to do. But it just, I in the end, I think with legal aid, wasn't prepared to tolerate that chaos, and that's why I wanted to do something like Family Law Cafe, because it just seems so absurd that, you know, you go and do a piece of work and then had to fill in all these forms, and it was just craziness. I just wasn't prepared for it.
that still goes on, because, well, that aspect of it still, in terms of the form filling, because even things like you say, because the solicitor didn't fill in the forms correctly. And I remember I had a situation where a firm closed because of various legal aid issues, but my bill was still due to be paid. So I contacted the Legal Services Commission, Legal Aid Board at the time, and they said, oh, you know, you'll need to take it up with the Solicitors Regulatory Authority, because they are the ones that monitor this particular firm. So I did that, and I thought that it would be a very straightforward situation. I would just have to show them that I had done the work, show them that I hadn't been paid, and then I would be compensated. And they asked me, I had to disclose my bank statements and that of my household in order to demonstrate that I would suffer hardship if I did not get paid for the work that I had done.
Yeah, I remember that now.
Hang on a second. I said, I've done the work. And it was just in the end, I just wrote it off. It was just such a bizarre situation.
It is bizarre. Yeah, I remember that now. Why?
Yeah, I didn't.
I think I was asked to show that years
ago.
Show
hardship.
It's madness, isn't it? Yeah. What? Sorry, we need to get off this subject, because it's like bringing back, like, I'm going to be having nightmares. But what do you really enjoy doing now? You know, your dream brief, then it's like something comes in.
I mean, it's just too many. In fact, my favourite type of brief is the one where we are the complete sort of underdog in a way, the parent that people have written off, the local authority have written off, or the grandparent who is, trying to get access to their grandchildren and nobody supporting them, or just those cases where that but for you being in that room and speaking up for that family, they're likely to just be sort of, cast aside.
I think that standing up for people is something that is a really exciting part of what we do. Maybe the main thing, that standing up for someone who wouldn't have that ability to have pull in those legal arguments. And as you said, even better here, you have other advocates there who are backing you.
Absolutely. Sort of writing notes, this question or whatever.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I think you're absolutely right in terms of making the point about who was representing the child that day.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And sometimes I think as well, going back to this point about transparency, some of the things, and obviously we can't divulge too much confidences, but some of the things that I saw, the way that the grandparents were being treated, the way that the parents, okay, they had their problems, but they should still deserve respect. They are the parents. Yeah. They have a role. They were never not going to be in this child's life if the court accepted our application, but just watching the way that professionals dealt with families. I mean, some of it was I'm sure if there was a camera in the room, a lot of what happened would not have happened. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because people would become more circumspect about how they treat people that are going through these very difficult proceedings. Care proceedings are so difficult.
Yeah. And as you say, things can turn so quickly. And as you're talking, I'm just thinking of these different cases and things that have happened. And there are so many things that are, you look back and, I mean, I had a case, it was so long ago, but I went along and I was acting for a mother, and she'd already had, I think, 6 children taken into care. Yeah. She'd been in prison for murder, which was actually overturned on appeal, but, so things hadn't gone well. And no one would have predicted that the child did stay with her drug issue. She went into a mother and baby unit, and whether it was sensible or not, I did give her my phone number, and so she would phone me up sometimes and say, I just can't do this. And like, it's going to be fine. And she kept that child. And those odds were not there.
No, exactly.
But I felt with her, she had a background that if she got away from the people that she was with, which she did. Yeah. She went to South London, she'd been to in North London, and she had a good family background, and suddenly you feel that, they're going to pull through. And she did have that strength. Yeah. Quite incredible. Yeah. And we're just part of that, and it is a real privilege, isn't it?
Absolutely.
To be part of
a privilege. It's a privilege to do a job that we love. It's a privilege for people to trust us with their sort of deepest, darkest, challenges that they're facing. And it always amazes me sometimes when talking to somebody, and they just start sort of sharing who they are with you and some of the things that they faced over the years. And I think, gosh, you don't know me from Adam, really.
Yeah.
But you're placing your life really, and the lives of your children in my hands. I mean, it really is a privilege to be able to do that, and to have been in it for 20 years, I just feel like, oh my gosh, this is the best job in the world.
How do you feel about money cases? Do you like doing finances?
I do. Yeah, I do. I'm one of the strange ones.
Yeah, you'll do it. You'll be in a care case and you'll do money cases. Yeah. What do you think the challenges are in money cases?
I think because, again, and I don't want to keep sort of wagging the finger at television, but, we only ever see those, and the media, but we only ever see those sort of sensational cases, sort of, footballer's wife gets, everything and his future earnings. So sometimes people come to court and they say, well, I read this thing in the newspaper and I read this, or my friend Marjorie, when she went to court, she got, and so it's just about sort of managing, again, people's expectations that, we do have a set of criteria that the court will apply. I think one of the hardest things, and I know that there is a movement against this, is the issue about how much people's conduct within a marriage should feature in the financial remedies settlement. And you have, it's nothing worse than saying to somebody, actually, I know he was a terrible husband, or I know they were a terrible wife, but their behaviour wasn't bad enough for you to be, compensated, which is what sometimes people are looking for when they come to court.
I have a view about this. I feel that certainly cases I'm doing, I'm like, are you joking? You know, the outrageous conduct. Well, I feel conduct's going to make a big comeback because people because the courts just, no, we're not going to have conduct. And you always warn people, don't have conduct. It's going to increase the costs. But I feel there are people that are behaving so badly now that we're like, we're going to have to bring this in. And because the courts are kind of letting them, the feeling is they're getting away with
literal murder.
Just sort of shifting hundreds of thousands of pounds. And so I think it's due for a bit of a revival. And of course, you know, the laws changed with coercive and controlling, but that wasn't a criminal offence before.
Exactly.
So I think, you know, and people would say to me, you know, domestic abuse, it's not conduct unless it's really financial. But I think that there is a report to say that, you know, should this be looked at as conduct?
Definitely. I think there's more work to be done because, I mean, I meet so many, and it is particularly women, I will say, that perhaps within their, you know, their 10-year relationship or however long it's been, that they didn't have any control over finances or, you know, in some instances, they have to provide, you know, they're allowed to go shopping, but they've got to bring back receipts and things like that. And so one of the criteria, you know, in Section 25 is about, you know, income, resources and so on, but equally income which you might reasonably acquire in the future. But if you're somebody that has gone through, you know, a decade of being made to feel that they're not capable of doing anything, of course that's going to impact your capacity to earn going forward. So I think there are lots of, you know, interesting discussions to be had about whether conduct should be as rigid as it is at the moment, or whether judges should actually start to broaden that out a bit to look at, okay, well, it might not look like conduct in isolation, but how is that, and we talked about the ripple effect earlier, how does that impact this person's ability to move on, to earn, to study, to whatever? Do you know what I mean? If we're wanting people to have, you know, it's all fine and well saying, let's have a clean break. But what does clean break look like for someone who maybe hasn't worked or has only worked in very sort of a limited capacity for a short period versus someone who's had a, you know, long career and they're on an upward spiral and they're, you know, likely to be earning hundreds of thousands of pounds. So I think, you know, perhaps we advocates need to not be so quick to dismiss the conduct. Oh, no, don't talk about conduct and whatever, but give people the opportunity to present it, you know, to the court. And it's quite helpful doing money cases and doing children cases and doing care, because I always see lots of overlaps. And I'm able to help my clients sort of fit jigsaws together rather than saying, oh no, I can't cover that, I'm going to
I think we should do everything. I mean, I don't do care now because obviously at Family Law Cafe it's a business and people come to us. We basically say, what do you need help with? And then work out what it will cost them and then make a plan for them and get it all done. Although there are some care cases we have been involved in, actually, little you know, a little bit of information where we've actually made a difference and we've worked alongside the fact that people getting public funding, but we've been able to give them advice. But I think by dealing with the whole spectrum of family law, I think you really need to understand. I know people like to specialise, but I think that you know can be better for doing everything. I mean, just talking then lastly about private children matters. It's a really tough area, isn't it? Because people have these massive delays, really, really sad stories. And what I find interesting is that you have the way matters are dealt with in care and in private children. And often there's kind of overlapping behaviours, but it's a completely different regime, isn't it?
That's right. I mean, the level of urgency which are given to care cases is you know, it's quite astonishing, and it's understandable. But why would a child in a private law situation, you know, be treated in such a way that their case can wait, sort of thing? And you know, we're all seeing even longer delays, sort of, you know, 6 months, 8 months. But worse than that, Joanna, the situation where you have a case listed and then the day before you get a call from the court, you know, we're terribly sorry we don't have a judge, we're terribly sorry we don't have a legal advisor in the magistrate's court, your case can't go ahead. I mean, it's every litigant's nightmare to get that call.
So
you know,
wrong.
the day before, you know, they've made arrangements, they've sort of geared them. Sometimes the child has been spoken to. They know that, you know, the judge is going to make a decision tomorrow, to be told, you know, come back in 6 months, or, you know, where there are issues over contact and you're not seeing your child, and then to be told, well, actually, you're going to have to wait another 6. I mean, it's just
That's heartbreaking
appalling
and wrong.
Yeah, totally.
And I don't know, I don't see it would be that hard to change this. What I'd like is a central administration. I don't think it should be geographic. These days, a lot of cases are on CVP anyway, on video. So, or have a pool of judges that step in, because judges can get up to speed on things really quickly. It should never happen.
We used to have that, actually. We used to have the district judge of the day. I don't think I'm not sure if it's still, I mean, I haven't seen it for a long while. That doesn't mean it's not happening, but I'm sure I'll be corrected.
Was that when you went on Fridays to Central Family Court, just on an urgent matter on Friday morning?
It would be any day. You would just go on the morning, you'd go to the office, fill in your form. They'd say to you, you know, go to this level or wait in this area. I mean, now you go down there and, you know, every shutter is down. You don't even know if anybody's...
open up. I would start. Open up the court office.
Absolutely.
You've got to speak to people. You cannot, these emails that go unanswered for months. It's just terrible.
Exactly.
I don't want to get onto moaning.
I know. Yeah.
Let's be positive. Let's roll it back.
I mean, I think the positive thing is that the quality of decision making has definitely improved. I mean, I'm certainly finding, even if parents don't necessarily agree with how their case is being dealt with, once the judge takes the time, or the magistrate takes time to explain the situation, and it's all about, again, managing expectations. I know that there was a period, particularly in private law, because we're all pushed for time, you know, you meet your client an hour before, half an hour before, and I think that's really tough. I think it should be, you know, standard for us to meet our clients at least a week before, if possible. If not, maybe even, 2 or 3 days before. So you can have that talk. You can prepare them for what's going to happen.
Well, that's how we work.
Answer their questions, tell them, what to, I mean, I always say, bring snacks, bring water, bring something that's going to help you get through the day. It could be a long day. Anything that they're curious about, not sure about, nervous about, so that you can talk it through with them. Do you know what I mean?
Give them a whole service.
Yeah, exactly. And at least that way, when they do, go through the doors of the court, they've got some idea about what they're walking into. So I think in general, the quality of what happens when we're in the court has definitely improved. I think the judges are taking much more time to explain their decisions and their decision-making process. I think if, and I've seen it myself, you have a client who comes in, maybe they're anxious, maybe they feel like you're not talking fast enough or whatever, and they try and sort of, shout out or whatever. And judges are really compassionate. They understand if the emotion gets the better of somebody. Sometimes because of the way we sit is strange, you're in front, your client's behind. The judge might say, oh, Miss Small, your client looks like she's trying to speak to you, or Miss Small, your client looks a bit distressed. Do they want a break? I had a client who was pregnant. She came to court and she was so hungry, and she ordered Deliveroo, and the food arrived just as we were going into court. And I said to the judge, I'm really sorry, my client is just eating. And she told my client, bring the food. I know they probably shouldn't have done, but she said, your client's pregnant. If baby needs to eat, she needs to eat. And, I just thought that was lovely. And my client was so happy because she was really, really, she'd hung on as long as she could. But the judge was saying, look, it's really important, talking to her about nutrition and all this sort of stuff. And then my client came out and said, oh, the judge was really nice, wasn't she? And that, you want them to leave. Exactly. You want them to leave a stressful situation, but still feel that they've been, treated well and treated respectfully. So I'd say that is definitely, a plus point of being in the family court. And I like to reassure my clients that, look, these judges, they are interested in the well-being of your child, and that is what they are there for.
That's what they're for.
That's what they're there for. Yeah.
Arlene, we could just chat all day. And indeed, we probably will. We'll probably just keep chatting. Really lovely to have you on our podcast. Love working with you, and really, all power to you and everything you're doing and all your initiatives. And just keep doing it.
And you too. Thank you so much, Joanna. I've loved it. Thank you.